Mario. Notoriously speaking, Mario games lack any semblance of a real plot, but in the simplest terms, they do have one due to the emotion driving our hero to rescue his princess, all caused by the act of her being kidnapped. This sequence of events, or domino effect in a sense, is the basis for a plot rather than a story. A story is basically just a fantasy world where things happen that don't really connect to each other, or where we, the audience, feel no emotional attraction or engagement to what is happening. Take A Cure for Insomnia, for example, a movie with no plot or anything else going on for that matter, except for a person reading a poem. We, the audience, feel no connection to what he is saying because it has no meaning to us. Other examples of this include things like The Straight Story, which is a film about someone driving a lawnmower 240 miles in order to make amends for his brother who had a stroke. Now, this story has more meaning than A Cure for Insomnia, as there is emotion and motive behind the character's action. However, the reason it doesn't have a plot is because throughout the journey and the movie, the interactions the character has and everything they do have no lasting meaning other than to happen in the story. They have sentimental meaning, surely, and some interactions may be more memorable, but nothing loops back around into a twist or into a satisfying plot that follows our character through his journey. It is simply point A to point B, and whatever interactions our character has along the way are nothing more than blips on an otherwise meaningless adventure, from the point of view of the audience at least. Video games have a different experience when it comes to plot and story. When it comes to movies, a plot is the thing that drives it into being enjoyable. If a movie doesn't have a story, why would one put themselves through that experience? There's no fun to be had, and for the most part, nothing to gain from watching said movie. The reason video games are different is because of their interactivity. A game can be fun and engaging through the gameplay it is, and have no plot or emotional value to the player. In this sense, a popular game franchise can be built without ever establishing a story or lasting arcs among characters. In the same way, a video game can be based entirely on plot, with examples being games such as The Last of Us. They hold their story almost as a movie would, but these experiences are able to be longer and more interactive, allowing for the passage into becoming a video game. Generally, games like this lack incredibly compelling and unique gameplay, which isn't true for all of these games, but a lot of the time the gameplay is simply choosing paths or following directions. On rare occasions, a game can have a strong plot and strong gameplay accompanying it, such as Undertale. The game is charming in its story, and the gameplay aspects that accompany them, such as the puzzles and battles with enemies who are continually intriguing to fight. Some enemies are not intent on killing the player in the plot, some are more evil and menacing than they appear, all leading to the culmination of the plot, with Flowey the Flower, who was introduced at the beginning of the story, mutating into a final boss with insanely difficult but fun gameplay. This game is a crossbreed, a fun mix of having a good story and unique and fun gameplay alongside it. It's a balance that's difficult to strike these days, especially with big games being pumped out at the rate they are. Generally speaking, good gameplay as a system can be developed in a certain amount of time, but a compelling plot that can continuously engage the audience may take more time than allotted by these bigger corporations. Because of this, many new big games lack incredibly compelling stories, such as the new Halo, for example. But not having a compelling plot doesn't mean a plot doesn't exist. Halo certainly has one, it just isn't more than an evil monster attacked. He has minions, shoot minions, and beat him. So in this case, what boat does Mario fall under? Does he not have a plot, or does he just have one that isn't very compelling? Well, to make a blanket statement over the entire franchise, more games than not have a very similar concept, especially the 2D variety. Princess Peach was captured, and Mario has to save her. There are slight alterations now and then, such as 3D World where fairies were kidnapped rather than Peach, but overall this is the general story for all the Mario games, and the story I'm going to be using for this analysis. The basis for a plot is there, as there is an emotional drive behind the character's action. However, in most of Mario's games, the hero's journey is almost completely disconnected from this actual conflict between him and Bowser. The levels and gameplay are traversals through jungles, grasslands, and deserts, which are inhabited by Bowser's critters, sure. But do they connect directly to the story? Perhaps not, but this is where we have to look back at what I said about Halo. While the nature may be really stupid and the enemies the gameplay is built off of may seem completely unengaging and disconnected from the story, the bare-bones narrative fits the requirements for being a plot because it has a lasting evil presence and a hero who is constantly fighting to get that evil defeated. Mario is the same way. I would say our Plumber's games do have a plot because of this. They have a start point with Bowser kidnapping Peach, and this beginning conflict is really what tipped the scale for me. If the interaction with Bowser at the end of the game was completely out of the blue with no earlier context, that would be a story because of how disjointed that would make everything. Which begs the question with the original Mario game due to the lack of story or introduction to the conflict at the beginning of that game. But due to the toads that constantly tell our hero that the princess is another castle, I'll let that one slide. But because an action is taken against Mario, he now has the right to take an action against Bowser, which builds the bare bones and base layer for a plot that can be used in a simple video game, such as Mario, because the gameplay can be what carries the project. So in the end, yes, Mario does have a plot, one that is completely uninteresting at its core and incredibly bare bones, but because there is a constant influence on the emotion of the audience that can influence the audience to feel some sort of motivation to complete the game, it meets the minimal guidelines to be a plot. I'm just glad this is a video game that can be carried by its gameplay and not a movie that has to be carried by its plot. Son of a...